Welcome to the Bungo. Welcome to our first episode of In Conversation With, where we'll be speaking to local people, musicians, friends of ours about their life and times in Sunderland. And our first guest is Mr. Barry Hyde. Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome, Barry.
Kenny, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. We've known each other a long time, and you can talk, and I love having chats with you, but never really managed to get you down in one place and kind of find out everything. Try to piece together, what maybe has happened in your life, and you've always been very open and very generous in talking. So I thought, ideal person to chat about. But I imagine there's a lot of people interested in in your stories and what's how your life up to date. So a little bit like this is your life. Just want to kind of start off talking about growing up as a young lad. Earliest memories maybe, but kind of earliest memories of music and first picking up an instrument.
Yeah. I've been really lucky with music because my mum and dad are both massive fans of music, especially me dad, who has a very typical kind of... my dad was born in the 50s. He got into music at a very young age for kind of classical music and I guess early pop music. And then he became a flare-wearing, long hair hippie, and he was into Zeppelin and Free, and he started collecting records and stuff. And certainly music was, still is a central part of his life. So me and my brother and sister heard all sorts of amazing music when we were very young. I remember hearing the Velvet Underground when I was still practically in nappies, Growing up through the 80s, this kind of mixture of the kind of really good dub, reggae, classic stuff, the Beatles, then the 80s stuff like the Cocteau Twins and some classical music. And we used to sit and listen to music as a pastime,
The way it should have been done as a family.
Well, it was just as but I think it was kind of my mum and dad both nurses, and my mum was on night shift, and my dad would kind of look after us on a weekend, and we'd sit and listen to quite ambient music. This great album actually called From Gardens Where We Feel Secure by an artist called Virginia Astley. Okay. And it's this like British instrumental music mixed with animal samples, not like Ross Geller's, but beautiful. The use of beautiful nature sounds, and we used to lie down and listen to it, And I've got incredible memories of that, And music was something that was quite naturally placed in our lives, and so when it came, I think when me and our Dave became musicians, we had some kind of advantage in as much as we'd heard a lot. Yeah. And if someone's read a lot of books, you say that they're well read, but we were well listened. And that's so important, the palate. So that it was very natural for us to pick up instruments later on. After our Dave was very young. He was practically just out of primary school when he started gigging. But I was a little bit older.
Your parents hadn't played instruments per se, but they just loved music.
My mum, my mum loves to sing.
Right.
But she'll admit herself she couldn't carry a tune in a bucket, But it doesn't matter, No. What really matters is the person enjoys what they're doing. That's what really counts. But my mum used to play kazoo. Okay. In a march and jazz band.
Which key?
All of them.
Yeah.
And my dad actually did have learned some an instrument, kind of like a brass instrument, when he was a kid, and had some natural ability, but I think he kind of got into playing football. I started playing the piano when I was really young. My dad bought a piano. I was going to say online, but it certainly wasn't from online. He must have got it from the local newspaper, and it was £5, and it sat in a pub. So he brought it in the house, and it stank of nicotine and beer. And most of the keys didn't even have it wouldn't have been ivory, but you know what I mean? They were like just wood. But that was a toy of fascination for me when I was a child. And I learned how to play this piece of music by Bach called It's a Prelude in C. Right. Much later on, I used it actually as a song on a solo album I released a few years ago. I pinched the chords, because I would never write chords quite as good as that. But so music was an important part of our life. I mean, we used to watch like the Blues Brothers. That was another pastime, or like the Kate Bush video collection. I think there's a few reasons why my dad would want to watch that. But that amazing strange music when back when artists were given free rein to kind of develop over the course of a few albums, rather than maybe your last single it only got onto 5 Spotless playlists, so your career's over. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's very different now. But I'm not jaded though. I feel very positive about modern creativity, but it's just different now.
So what was the first thing that you heard that stuck with you, almost like you were obsessed by?
I kind of put it into different categories in my life. I was saying to you earlier on, that this album by Lou Reed called Berlin, I remember hearing some of a particular track from that when I was really young, called The Kids. And it's this like harrowing tale of a woman who has her children taken off her by the government because she's been working as a sex worker, right? And it's like really graphic lyrics, and I suppose it's not really children shouldn't be able to hear this, but my dad had it on, and it ingrained into us, So that was a big one. I remember buying. It was really through the guitar. I got into the guitar, and then music meant so much more because I felt like I was somehow on the cusp of being able to make music. So it was seeing, like, going through my dad's videos and seeing one that just said Woodstock, and I put that in. It just so happened that, because the Woodstock film's massive, but it was right at the end of the film, and the last person on it is Jimi Hendrix, right? Because he played at like 9 o'clock in the morning and there was hardly anyone there comparatively, but it was this really close shot of a guy with his hands, and he's playing the guitar behind his head or with his teeth or something, and then he breaks into the Star Spangled Banner, and it was like being shot with electric beams. It was like, whoa, what is this? And
so
then
you had a guitar then?
Yeah. I'd been learning, and I got it, but it was really that kind of seeing it for real. I'd heard Hendrix's music, and then I was really into Led Zeppelin, and then I got into Oasis because I couldn't play chords. I could only play solos, and then I was like, I learned how to play bar chords and proper chords by learning Oasis songs. And it was an amazing time to be a young musician in the mid-90s. It was but my band was Supergrass, who I just loved and still do, because they were like practically my age, but they'd signed to EMI, and their first album's just incredible songwriting. I think it was a lot more interesting than the contemporaries.
So, when so you going back to school and playing an instrument for the first time, we spoke earlier on about what it was like going to Thornhill School with and having a guitar and long hair. What was, I imagine you stuck out like a sore thumb.
Yeah. Well, I already had long hair when I went to school. I had long hair in primary school, and I wanted short hair, but my mum didn't want me to have short hair for some reason, which is strange, because I wouldn't dream of like trying to impose the hairstyle of my child. And my mum's a lovely woman, by the way. She's not a dictator or anything like that, but it was more like, you can't have you've got to have long hair, Barry, because your head's the wrong shape. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, well, you've got it was something like, you've got a head, it's shaped like a bullet. You've got to have long hair. If you have short hair, you're going to look strange. So I had long hair. I looked like an Afghan hound.
I've seen some great photos of it. Yeah.
And I went to school. I went on the open day to Thornhill, and I came from Richard Avenue, which was a very gentle little world with Mr. Shearer. And I think the teachers used to go to the pub on a lunchtime and come back. In the afternoons was like, you could go for a lie down. Yeah. it was mad in the 80s, man, you know. I can't imagine what it must have been like years before when they were actually drinking at work, you know. But I went to this open day at Thornhill School, and I was shocked because it had kids from all over the city. Yeah. And I'd had a very sheltered little life, loads of records, you know. Mum and Dad both had jobs and stuff, and I was meeting these kids from areas like Pennywell and Hendon and stuff like that, and I was scared because I've suddenly realised how soft I was, you know, and I was getting loads of grief for having long hair, kids coming up asking as if I was a girl, stuff like that, you know, and the girls were actually scarier than the boys.
I mean, I went to Thornhill, but I didn't move there until halfway through the third year when my old school Broadway closed down. But I still remember going there and thinking that it seemed loads bigger, and that was in the third year as well. Yeah. Whatever that year is called now. So it is daunting, but I went going through halfway through secondary school, halfway through an academic year as well. Went through the same stuff. Probably didn't have as long hair. My mother similarly picked my hairstyle. We had a friend of my granddad's who drew a charcoal picture of me and my sister, and it was in the sitting room, and it was a little bit like Steve Davis's, the snooker players. And when the barber used to come to cut it, my mum would go, Steve Davis. So I had no choice. I'm not sure what kind of head I had, but you know, I similarly got grief going to school, and I you know, looking back, is a bit character building. But you know, you probably would have. I wouldn't have ticked that box if I'd been given the choice when I joined up. Yeah. But you know, loads of people must go through. So how did you kind of win them over with, you know, your guitar and?
I got my hair cut. Right. Eventually, I managed to pluck up the courage to demand that I took control of my own follicles. Yeah. And then I took a picture of Keanu Reeves from Speed. Yeah. To the, and I got my hair cut. And then life changed. Oddly, it really did. It really did. I felt like I'd been reinvented, and that was really when I started to get into the guitar. And then I voluntarily grew my own hair to longer than it had ever been because I wanted to be John Paul Jones. And then I started wearing flares and blouses, you know. So like, I guess I was kind of not really ever in step, in time with my own, the moment of which you live in, you know. I'd always be like wanting to be in the 60s or the 70s. Yeah.
But is that a bit of, I often say to people who come in here for the first time and go, oh, you know, me kid's a little bit weird, I'm a little bit weird, and go, well, you know, we all are really. Most performers tend to have a bit of a split personality, but you want to be different to the norm. You know, part of you kind of wants to fit in, but part of you wants to be individual. So, you know, if everyone else is wearing tight stay press, you're probably going to wear kind of, you know, sort of flared farrows or baggy jeans or whatever.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I suppose what happened to me was I kind of went through the cultural changes of the 60s to the noughties within the last few years of my teenage years, because by the time I was 19, I was wearing tight, you know, punk rock style clothing. And that was kind of when I found my voice as a songwriter and singer, was through this influence of punk music and new wave, especially new wave punk. So that was what was a kind of took us in step to forming the Futureheads, and then that became this exciting journey, you know.
So before those types of music influence you, and you were coming to the bunker as part of the workshops with Dave the Right Honourable
Yeah.
Sir Dave Murray. You then were, you were a bit of a Oasis tribute band.
I was brought down by my arch rival, who was called Steve Lowe.
Okay.
And Steve was in my tutor group at school,
Right.
and we both started playing the guitar around the same time, and we had this kind of like friendly rivalry. We ended up doing bands together.
Yeah.
A band called the Mullet Police, which was a tremendous band. And yeah, I remember coming down, and I had long hair then, and I was really into Led Zeppelin, and I met these two brothers called Pete and Dave Brewis, and they were tutors at Dave Murray's youth project.
Like kind of
supervisors, musical.
Yeah.
They used to do lessons, and they used to kind of schedule the rehearsals. Really, looking back, that's what it was. And I just remember thinking, "Whoa!" Because they'd been doing professional music for many years at that point.
Yeah.
And Peter went off to university in Wales, but Dave was about, and I just remember watching Dave play the bass, thinking, "Whoa!" Like, what's he doing? He was so fluid, and he knew all the riffs that I wanted to know, and we became really close friends pretty quick. And eventually I joined their band, which is called the Underfoot, when I was 15, and we started gigging, in pubs, and that was tremendous for me.
Didn't Dave have kind of long hair at that time?
He had really long hair. He had really long hair.
Yeah.
I remember, actually, we were doing the Underfoot, and one day he turned up at my door, and I opened it looking like John Paul Jones, and he'd taken all of his hair off.
Really?
Right off, and I was like, it's like, what should I do?
Yeah.
Do I need to get my hair cut now? Dave was like, no. I'm like, I think I'm going to have to, But yeah, me, Pete and Dave were like thick as thieves, and we actually did a lot of music creation, and made a lot of plans and stuff like that.
How long were you coming to
The project?
workshop? Yeah.
A good amount, about 3 years, I think.
Yeah.
It was amazing. Dave, it was Saturday morning, 10 o'clock,
Yeah.
50 pence. And you'd be able to come in. We had a couple of rooms. I mean, this is way before you took over.
Yeah.
I used to teach. Eventually, I was one of the tutors, and I used to teach a guitar in a room up there.
Yeah.
There was half the roof on the floor, and it was covered in animal excrement, right? And I'd sit and teach people how to play G and E minor. It was rock and roll.
Yeah.
We used to rehearse on the top floor in the attic as well.
Yeah.
I don't know what the deal was, to be honest.
I know I found some photos. I mean, they're now flats, and I remember finding these photos. There's a room which was purple, and in one side of the room there's three lasses in leotards kind of dancing around. The other side of the room is like a gig going on.
It was brilliant. Dave Murray was just is a real kind of legend, a champion of Sunderland music, and coming here was a really pivotal for me and my brother. I mean, I ended up meeting the Queen because of Dave Murray's youth project. Right. Me and Ricky Murray and Steve, I think, and a lass called Sarah were selected to go to Berlin to meet Queen Elizabeth II,
really?
And Prince Philip. And it was so surreal, man. Like, it was in the British Embassy. in all of those A-frame newspaper headline boards you get.
Yeah.
It said the Queen in Berlin, but because it was in German, it said "Die Queen" in Berlin. So we were like, thought it was funny, but we spent like an entire day rehearsing how to be around the Queen.
Okay.
What to say, how to stand. Do you speak? Don't you speak?
Somebody telling you how to do this, or he's just...
No, this was like, it was the deal. So you imagine everywhere she goes, this happens.
Yeah.
The protocol. So we got taken out for meals by these like super wealthy British ambassadors and stuff, and Ricky Murray was like ordering
Ferrero Rochers.
sirloin steaks, and I'm like, Ricky, man, what you doing? They're like 25 euros each. It's like, I don't care. I'm like, I'm eating a chicken sandwich. But the day it was quite amazing. The day came, and we got the glass centre to make a commemorative bowl for the Queen, right? And it had gold thread going through it, and it was very, well, it was relatively ornate for us. Maybe it's not so ornate for the Queen, because you can imagine what her idea of what ornamental is versus ours, but nevertheless, it was very humble. I think a perfect gift, you know. It probably cost a few quid as well, you know. And it was my job to hand it over to the Queen, you know. And I was like waiting, and Steve Lowe's there and Ricky's there, and we're all just like, wow, this is mad, you know. There's loads of snipers outside. If you looked out the window, every building had a sniper, you know. It was so exciting. And handing this bowl over, and she came round, and I said, I handed it, and she went, what is it?
Pirate.
I said, it's a bowl, Your Highness. Oh, thank you. And then Prince Philip came up to Ricky Murray and went, how did the fickle finger of fate fall upon your head? We were like, what's he saying, you know? It was so strange. But it was, you know, that was a crucial time, because the world was just starting to open up a bit, you know. I was kind of 18. I don't know if I'd been travelling yet. I probably had been. I was just about to form the band. I went backpacking around Europe when I was a teenager on what's called interrailing.
Yeah.
And it was something like 120 quid. And you could travel anywhere in Europe. Right? For 120 quid, you can't even get the bloody train to London for that now. But you could go to the south of Italy with this thing, ding, 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 you know, and you stay in youth hostels and stuff like that. And it was amazing. And that was actually when, because I'd been in bands, but going on that trip with some friends was the real kind of catalyst for me getting what's called the wanderlust. You know, like I don't have that now. I'm not interested, man. I can't even be bothered to go to the Metro Centre. But, you know, when I was in my late teens, I wanted to travel everywhere. So that inspiration was like, okay, I'm going to come home. I went away for a month. I'm going to come home. I'd already soundproofed my garage, because I used to work in a call centre, and I spent all my money on soundproofing material. Right. And we got this garage. It was like a kind of clubhouse, and form a band. So I came back, and the idea was form a band, make it really good, so that I can go travelling.
Right.
That was it, you know. And we did it, you know, like within, I think, a year, this band was in a van, travelling around Germany and Holland and Austria with a guy called Pete Dale, who had a band called Milky Whimshake, and the Futureheads had formed. I think we would just about release our first EP, and we were doing it.
Right. And the lineup was as it was.
Yeah, Pete Bruce was initially in the band, but when we got offered this tour, he wasn't. I don't think Pete and Dave have ever loved touring in the same way that I did for many years, you know. Certainly at the time, Pete wasn't up for touring squats in Germany and Holland. I mean, of course, it sounds terrifying, but in reality, it was amazing. It was like really well put together venues, sleeping quarters, free food, usually vegan food, before it was trendy. And, you know, there's no rider. It's like just pull yourself a pint.
Right.
A lot of squats in Germany and Holland, the government funded it. Yeah. He was expecting for there to be like heroin addicts sleeping in the corner, and we'd be like, you know, getting robbed. But anyway, you know, we trained our Dave up. He was only 15. Well, he must have been 16 because he was in college.
Had you been playing drums at all? Or?
Yeah, he'd been playing for about 5 years. He could already play, but
he
you know,
come to the workshop for a bit, didn't he?
Davey?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was in a band with the Chapel Brothers and a guy called Hess, and they were called The Fuzz.
Okay.
And they were mint. They had some of their tunes that they'd written Dave Murray's workshops, and they used to do a great version of My Generation. Right. And there was these two twins and this cool singer who looked like a kind of Caucasian version of Hendrix. Yeah. And our Dave.
Is that Hess?
Yeah. Yeah. Hess, exactly. And they were mint. Yeah. They were really good. But I think they were just, that thing of life kind of pulled them apart or something. But our Dave, that was his real first, apart from our Oasis tribute band. But he started doing gigs when he was, when we first started touring America, Dave wasn't even allowed in some of the venues. And that was for like 4 years. Because I think his first trip to America, he was 17.
So what did he do?
So he used to have, in certain states when it was really strict, because you got to be 21 to drink, so you got to be 21 to go into bars. Yeah. But some places that they're not as strict, but generally there'd have to be and this is when we were playing small places, they used to hire a security guard to stand next. So our Dave would be drumming, he'd be just there. And then he'd have to walk him back onto the tour bus, like he's a kid. Obviously, we have a different attitude towards that in this country, He'd already been nightclubbing for 4 years by that point, We used to go to the Manakee. There's a funny story, actually, involving someone you should definitely get on here, I would say, Neil Bassett.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Because he's a great bloke and he's done a lot, But so we started knocking about with Neil. We met him in the Manakee on a Friday, Saturday night. We used to go in. There was I guess we met him through James Jam's Boy Eater. Yeah. And when Brilliantine were playing, it was like, wow, this is the best band in town, And Neil's this incredible drummer, like a machine, but he's this huge guy, with these drumsticks look like chopsticks in his hands, But we got on really well, and I remember once we'd known Dave for a couple of years. He came round to mine, and Dave answered the door in his school uniform, and Neil was like, "Why are you wearing a school uniform?" Dave's like, "I'm 15." He's like, "What?" He'd been going out clubbing with them for several years by that point, Yeah. So, what was that? Yeah. So I don't know what I was talking about there, but yeah. So it was this experience of travelling really that made me want to have my own band, and that was the first batch of songs that we wrote, ended up essentially being our first album.
So what I know there was a hodgepodge of influences, but what kind of guided the band into this, the sound that sort of developed into the first album?
I think it was more finding that I'm trying to search again for the same epiphany of what's the ideal style of music to make for where you are in your life. Yeah. So right now I'm like, oh man,
nursery rhyme.
No, it's like I want to write some kind of mature music. I don't know, but at the time it was just everything kind of came together in that, the resources that we had, which was basically traditional rock instruments, matched with our approach to singing, culminated in this very short, what we class as exciting, fast, choppy music, and that was perfect for our physique and attitudes at the time. I say that retrospectively, but I guess the hardest thing about creating music is being right on the dime, on the penny with your
timing of everything,
with just your the part of you that is shrouded by your life and your personality, that inner energy that all genuine music is full of, and you've got to grab it while you can, because there's so many different factors that come into your life existence, which is going to suppress you being able to get your artistic idea out,
So was there a time when you didn't sing with your own accent?
No. I've never done that. But I say that maybe slightly smugly.
Yeah.
But no, I never did it. But my accent's changed a lot, because I spent most of my 20s living with Americans on tour buses, and I kind of I think to some degree we over exaggerated our accent because that was something that defined us as something else. But there was never singing in whatever. I mean,
that it's come naturally makes it easy, because for someone who's I don't sing in my own accent, although somebody might listen and be able to tell. I think it can be difficult for somebody who's not used to doing it. But it came at a time though when it was acceptable after years of not being acceptable. There were rappers, UK rappers using their own accents. There were Arctic Monkeys, whatever, Goldie Look and Chain. There was all these accents coming from around the UK. So I don't imagine you all got together and said let's cut out this shit. Let's all use our own accent.
Well, I think thinking back, Ross and Jaff used to sing in American accents when they were in their band before. It was called Milo, and they were very much influenced by bands like Pavement and Weezer. It's natural, but I was very much a case of. Well, it was actually this conversation that me, Dave, and Pete Brewers had when we were planning this band. That never really happened between the three of us, but I think individually we all made it happen. And one of the rules was sing in your own accent, and another one was no guitar solos. Another one was it was a strange one. It was a bit like Ghostbusters, don't cross the streams. Yeah. The rule was the drummer wasn't allowed to cross their hands. So there had to be this kind of drumming thing. And it was very much a manifesto or a rule book. Yeah. But for me, I only ever sang in my own accent. It wasn't until I started to do that I felt confident to sing, because it was like a kind of forbidden world for me, because I was this kind of guitarist, and I just singing such a personal thing. You've got to be comfortable with the sounds that are coming out of your mouth, no matter what it is. When I hear a lot of the modern music, there seems to be a certain style of singing that is very kind of common, and it's a way of pronouncing words. And it comes from, it's an American influence, but not like directly. And it's kind of chew instead of you. With you. Yeah. And it comes from rap mixed with, and you're hearing a lot of young musicians singing like that, or like going really kind of mousy, small, kind of cute. Yeah. But for me, it was like I wanted to shout and get those endorphins and grab people's attention. Yeah. The Britpop thing was really dead then, and we wanted to just make blisteringly fast but intricate music. Right.
Did you purposely kind of, in terms of the songwriting, did you purposely try and find some words that kind of sounded better in her accent? There are words that you think, actually that. You can spot it a mile off, and you can't sing it any other way. Really. Yeah.
I think it just became a natural. The way I usually, especially then, used to write lyrics would be I'd write some kind of guitar thing, and then I'd just kind of start making noises, and then.
So the riffs came first, the music,
often,
and then you kind of put stuff to it.
But usually, like instantaneously,
Right.
And then I remember when I used to work at Quick Save, which was a rough place, man. I used to see people come in, and they used to steal entire boxes of bacon, and then just go and sell it in the park inn. Yeah. In the security guards were worse than the shoplifters. Like, they were stealing crates of whiskey a day. Jaff used to work. He got me the job there, But I remember I'd be on the checkout, and I'd started a song that morning or the night before, and I'd sit and I'd become obsessive about these little songs that some of them were only a minute long. So I'd have like, and I'd be somehow like composing them a little bit, sketching in my head. So there's that obsessive thing that really is important, because you don't need to be sitting with a guitar to write a song.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you use your mind.
Well, yeah, some people write lyrics and have a tune to it and a melody and kind of craft it that way. Have any of you as you've developed and as you've got older, have any of your songs been written that way? Kind of written almost a poem and structured that way?
When we did the most recent Futureheads album, I had loads of music, and I decided that I wasn't going to do any lyrics until I'd finished all the music. Because, you know, I suppose in terms of the structures and the formats of the songs now, it's very different to how it was when we first started, because we do write conventional songs with intros and verses and bridges and all of that, you know, so you can kind of structure stuff before you start getting into your melodies. And then it was very much like, okay, I'm going to now go into lyric mode, and it's really hard to get those first words. Everything sounds terrible at first. It's like, oh, God, I can't write lyrics. And then you get like a word, as you were saying, you know, about like certain words are more musical, and then suddenly you're piecing together these melodies. And actually the lyric part and melody writing is like my favourite bit, because there's a lot more flexibility with language than with, you know, our English language than there is with scales, you know, so you can really have fun, but always trying to just make it so that the lyrics aren't just embarrassingly terrible. You know, like I do think about that with riffs as well. I'm like, this is rubbish.
Yeah. I mean, how much, you know, is discarded generally, or are you now kind of efficient with your time and just go into?
I loved writing the most recent. It was like we split up for 7 years. You know, we made music in between, but when we came to create this, I would say comeback album, whatever that means, but we decided to make a new album and get back together. We decided we would only get back together if we were going to make a new album. So it was really crucial that we did it, you know. And I've really enjoyed it. I had 3 kids. When they would go to bed, I would go to work downstairs on an electric guitar, trying to get the rust out of my fingers, writing riffs, really not plugged in. And it was actually an amazing experience, piecing slowly, but grafting it. Yeah. You know, sometimes staying up until 3 o'clock in the morning, writing riffs, and that magic of like, I love the privacy of it, you know, and having to condense the effort into this period of time was almost quite magical, because everyone else is asleep and you're like making music, and that's almost like something childlike about that, you know. And Ross was doing the same, and Jeff brought a song in, and it was a real task actually to make that album, time commitment wise, because we're all working, all got, you know, different family lives. I was lecturing, I was doing a master's degree, setting up businesses and making a new album. But it was great, you know. It was like, this is what I want, is kind of to be busy.